Zahara was a young woman full of dreams, her heart yearning for a future of her own making. She was known in her village for her intelligence, beauty, and kindness. But none of these qualities could change the harsh reality she faced. Since the death of her mother, she had lived under the rule of her stepmother, a woman whose heart seemed untouched by kindness. The village elders often whispered about how different Zahara's life would have been if her mother had lived. But fate had dealt her a cruel hand, leaving her at the mercy of a woman who saw her as nothing more than a burden or an opportunity. Unlike other girls in the village who eagerly anticipated marriage as a moment of honor and stability, Zahara viewed it as a loss of freedom. She wanted more than a life of servitude to a husband she did not love. She longed to carve her own path, to explore the world beyond the boundaries of her village, to learn and grow into the woman she knew she could become. But in her village, traditions ruled above all else, and a young woman's fate was never her own to decide. One evening, as Zahara carried a basket of water from the river, she noticed an unusual silence in her home. Stepping inside, she saw her stepmother sitting across from an elderly man draped in fine garments. His face was lined with age, his hands decorated with rings of gold and jade. Zahara felt a deep unease settle in her stomach. The man, Chief Bako, was well known in the region, a wealthy, powerful leader, but one old enough to be her grandfather. Her stepmother's voice was filled with false sweetness as she beckoned Zahara closer. "You are a lucky girl," she said. "Chief Bako has chosen you as his wife." The words struck Zahara like a blow. She felt her breath catch, her pulse quicken. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "I don't want this." Her stepmother's eyes darkened. "You don't have a choice," she hissed. "This marriage will bring honor and fortune to our family. You will obey." Zahara turned to Chief Bako, hoping to find some sympathy in his expression, but his gaze was unreadable. He was silent, his presence alone enough to command obedience. Tears burned behind Zahara's eyes. She wanted to run, to protest, to beg the village elders for help, but she knew it would be useless. Tradition was stronger than her will, stronger than her dreams. Her fate had been decided for her, and there was no escape. As the reality of her situation settled in, a single thought filled Zahara's mind. Her life was no longer hers to control. But deep within her heart, a quiet, unbreakable resolve began to form. Destiny may have chosen this path for her, but she would not surrender to it without a fight. The day of the wedding arrived, but for Zahara, it felt like a funeral. The entire village was alive with music and celebration, the air thick with the scent of roasted meats and burning incense. Women dressed in bright fabrics danced to the beat of the drums, their laughter echoing through the air. Men drank and exchanged stories, praising Chief Bako for securing such a young and beautiful bride. Children ran between the guests, unaware of the sorrow hidden behind Zahara's forced smile. Draped in a stunning golden gown, Zahara sat beside her husband-to-be, her heart pounding with fear. Chief Bako, dressed in fine robes, held his head high, his face calm and composed. He was not cruel. He had not forced her with his own hands, but he was still the reason she was trapped. Zahara glanced at him, searching for something: pity, kindness, regret. But all she found was quiet acceptance, as if he had made peace with the life he had taken from her. The villagers whispered behind their hands as they watched her. Some pitied her, their eyes filled with sympathy, while others looked at her with envy. To them, Zahara was lucky. She would live in a grand home, draped in wealth, never knowing hunger or struggle. But what they failed to see was the cage around her, golden though it may be. Her stepmother, beaming with pride, moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations as if this marriage were her own achievement. To her, Zahara had fulfilled her purpose. She had brought status and riches to the family. There was no space for Zahara's pain in her stepmother's heart, only satisfaction at the fortune that now belonged to her. As the ceremony began, Zahara felt the weight of finality press down on her. The elders spoke words of blessing, the villagers cheered, and soon she and Chief Bako were bound together in marriage. With each word spoken, Zahara felt her dreams slipping further away, vanishing like mist in the morning sun. She was a wife now, a possession passed from one household to another. The thought made her stomach churn. She turned her gaze to the horizon, watching the last traces of daylight fade away. Would she ever be free again? Would there ever come a day when she could make a choice of her own? As the wedding feast began and the music grew louder, Zahara sat still, her hands folded in her lap, her face calm. But deep within her, the fire of defiance still burned, waiting for its moment to rise. The journey to Chief Bakos' mansion felt like a slow march toward imprisonment. Zahara sat silently in the grand carriage, her golden wedding attire now wrinkled and heavy. The further they traveled from her village, the more distant her past life became. By the time they arrived at the estate, she felt as if she had stepped into another world, one where she did not belong. The mansion was vast, a towering structure made of stone and adorned with intricate carvings. Servants rushed forward as Chief Bako stepped down, bowing low in respect. Zahara followed hesitantly, her feet barely touching the ground as she was led inside. The halls stretched endlessly, lined with flickering lanterns that cast eerie shadows on the walls. The scent of burning herbs and polished wood filled the air, and silence loomed despite the presence of so many people. Zahara expected hostility from the chief's household, but the first person she met was Mama Koto, Chief Bakos' first wife. She was an older woman with tired eyes, her face lined with years of wisdom and sorrow. Zahara braced herself for cruelty, but to her surprise, Mama Koto simply studied her for a long moment before speaking. "You are young," she said softly, almost sadly, "too young for this life." The words sent a shiver through Zahara, but before she could ask anything, Mama Koto turned away, her expression unreadable. Days passed, but Zahara never felt at home. She wandered through the mansion, feeling the weight of its silence pressing down on her. The servants moved quickly, avoiding eye contact, and whispered among themselves whenever she passed. Conversations halted the moment she entered a room. She overheard fragments of hushed voices, mentions of a dark secret, a hidden truth buried within the mansion's walls. Chief Bako himself remained distant. He was neither cruel nor affectionate, treating her more like a formality than a wife. He spoke little, his presence a heavy shadow that loomed over the estate. At night, Zahara would hear his footsteps pacing outside her chamber, but he never entered. Something about his silence unsettled her. It was not coldness, but secrecy. The more she observed, the more Zahara felt that something was deeply wrong in this house. The mansion held secrets, and Chief Bako was at the center of them. And though she had no idea what she would uncover, one thing was certain: she was not safe here. The days passed in quiet isolation, but Zahara's unease only grew. The mansion was vast, yet it felt suffocating, as if unseen eyes were always watching. The servants avoided unnecessary conversation, and Mama Koto, though kind, kept her distance. But there was one thing that caught Zahara's attention more than anything else: the locked room at the end of the west wing. She had first noticed it while wandering the halls, tracing her fingers along the old wooden doors. Every room was accessible except for one. The heavy iron lock was rusted but firm, and a strange symbol was etched into the wood. When she asked a servant about it, the woman's face went pale, and she quickly excused herself without answering. At night, Zahara found it difficult to sleep. The walls of the mansion carried whispers, soft murmurs that seemed to drift from nowhere. Sometimes she heard footsteps stopping right outside her chamber, yet when she opened the door, the hallway was empty. A cold fear settled in her bones, but curiosity burned even brighter. One evening, she ventured to the courtyard for fresh air and saw something unusual. In the dim glow of the lanterns, Chief Bako stood near the old well. speaking in hushed tones with a masked stranger. Zahara pressed herself against a pillar, straining to hear their conversation, but only caught fragments, words that made no sense to her. She cannot know. It is too soon. If the truth is revealed, everything will fall apart. Chief Bako's face was grim as he nodded, and then the stranger disappeared into the shadows. Zahara's heart pounded. What truth? And why was she being kept in the dark? The next morning, she found Mama Koto waiting for her, her expression unusually tense. The older woman hesitated before speaking, lowering her voice so no one else could hear. "Stay away from the West Wing," she warned. "There are things here that are better left undisturbed." Zahara frowned. "What do you mean?" Mama Koto only sighed. "Curiosity can be dangerous, child. Some doors should remain closed." But that warning only made Zahara more determined. Something was being hidden from her, something that had to do with that locked room, with the whispers at night, and with Chief Bako's secrets. And no matter what, she would find out the truth. The warning from Mama Koto echoed in Zahara's mind, but it did nothing to stop her curiosity. The locked room called to her like a whispered secret, refusing to be ignored. For days, she watched the hallway, studying the movements of the servants, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, one evening, when the mansion was silent and the moon cast long shadows across the floor, she made her move. With careful steps, she approached the heavy door. Her fingers trembled as she slid a stolen key into the lock, holding her breath as it clicked open. The air inside was thick with dust and time, carrying the scent of something long forgotten. The flickering light from her candle revealed a room frozen in secrecy. Stacks of old parchment and maps covered the wooden desk, their edges curled with age. Strange markings and symbols decorated the maps, pointing to places she did not recognize. A collection of letters, their ink faded, sat in a locked drawer, one that Zahara forced open with trembling hands. As she skimmed the words, her pulse quickened. Mentions of hidden wealth, forbidden alliances, and betrayals filled the pages. Then, in the far corner of the room, she spotted something else, a chest. Kneeling beside it, she pried it open, gasping as candlelight reflected off piles of gold coins, jeweled necklaces, and ceremonial daggers. The sight left her breathless. What was all this doing here? Was this fortune stolen, or was it meant for something far greater? Before she could think further, a voice, sharp and filled with barely contained anger, shattered the silence. "What do you think you're doing?" Zahara spun around, her heart slamming against her ribs. Chief Bako stood in the doorway, his face dark with a mixture of rage and something else. Fear. His hands clenched at his sides, his eyes flickering between her and the open chest. She expected him to yell, to demand answers, maybe even to punish her. But instead, he closed his eyes and exhaled deeply, his shoulders sagging as if carrying the weight of the world. When he spoke again, his voice was low, almost resigned. "It's time you knew the truth." Chief Bako sank into a wooden chair, rubbing his temples as if the weight of his own words exhausted him. Zahara stood frozen, her hands still gripping the edge of the chest filled with gold. Her heart pounded, her mind racing with questions. After a long silence, Chief Bako finally spoke. His voice was low, distant, as though he were pulling memories from the depths of his soul. "I was not always the man you see before you," he said. "Once, I was a warrior, a leader feared and respected across these lands. I fought for my people, defended our borders, and made many enemies." Zahara listened intently, trying to reconcile this image of a fierce warrior with the quiet, distant man she had come to know. His gaze darkened as he continued. "There was a time when I loved deeply, before power, before riches. But she was taken from me, betrayed by those I trusted most. That loss changed me." His fingers curled into fists. "I vowed never to be weak again." Zahara swallowed hard. She had never imagined that beneath Chief Bacchus' composed exterior lay a past shaped by war and heartbreak. But what did that have to do with her? "Then why did you marry me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Chief Bacchus' eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something human beneath his hardened exterior: regret. "Because you were in danger, Zahara." A chill ran down her spine. "Your stepmother. She did not give you away simply because of tradition," he said grimly. "She made a deal, a dangerous one. I took you in to keep you safe." Zahara's breath caught in her throat. Safe? From what? Chief Bacchus hesitated before answering. From the people who wanted to use you. People who would not have cared if you lived or died, as long as they got what they wanted. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Zahara clenched her hands at her sides. "You're saying my stepmother? She put me in danger?" Chief Bacchus nodded. "Her greed has set something terrible in motion, and now I fear it may be too late to stop it." Zahara felt the ground beneath her shift. Everything she thought she knew about her marriage, her stepmother, and her own fate was unraveling before her eyes. Zahara couldn't stay still after hearing Chief Bacchus' revelation. Her mind raced, piecing together the truth like shattered glass. If her stepmother had truly put her in danger, she needed to know why. And the only way to get answers was to return to the village. That night, while the mansion slept, Zahara wrapped herself in a dark cloak and slipped through the courtyard. She avoided the guards, moving like a shadow along the walls until she reached the stables. Taking one of the smaller horses, she rode through the moonlit fields, her heart pounding with each hoofbeat. By the time she reached the village, dawn was just beginning to break. The familiar huts and market stalls felt strange now, like a place she no longer belonged to. She moved carefully, staying hidden behind walls and trees, making her way toward her old home. Then she heard voices. Crouching behind a stack of firewood, she peered through the cracks of the mud brick wall. Inside, her stepmother sat across from a man Zahara had never seen before. A tall, scarred warlord with cruel eyes. His armor was worn but strong, and at his side, a sword glinted in the dim light. The girl was never important, her stepmother said coldly, sipping from a clay cup. She was just a means to an end. Zahara felt her stomach twist. The warlord leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. "And you're sure Chief Bacchus suspects nothing?" Her stepmother smirked. "That old fool thinks he saved her. But while he's busy protecting my foolish stepdaughter, you and your men will take everything he owns." Zahara's blood ran cold. It had never been about her. It had always been about power and greed. While she was sent away, her stepmother had been plotting with bandits to seize Chief Bacchus' wealth. And once they had it, Zahara would be discarded. Or worse, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She had to get back. She had to warn Chief Bacchus. Moving as silently as possible, she slipped away from the house, her heart pounding against her ribs. She climbed onto her horse and kicked hard, racing back toward the mansion. The sun was rising, painting the sky in streaks of red and gold, but Zahara could only think of one thing. She was running out of time. Zahara's horse galloped through the fields as the sun crept over the horizon. Her pulse pounded in her ears, her mind racing with the horror of what she had just overheard. She had to reach Chief Bacchus, had to warn him before it was too late. But as she neared the mansion, dread curled in her stomach. Something was wrong. Smoke curled into the sky. Then, the sound of screams. Zahara's breath hitched as she urged her horse forward, reaching the outer gates just in time to see chaos unfold. Bandits swarmed the courtyard, their swords flashing as they clashed with Chief Bacchus' guards. Fire licked the edges of the mansion's roof, embers scattering in the wind. Servants ran in every direction, some trying to fight, others desperate to escape. And then she saw her. Standing at the entrance, her stepmother watched the destruction with a satisfied smirk. Dressed in fine robes, she stood beside the warlord Zahara had seen earlier, her eyes gleaming with victory. Zahara's heart shattered. This wasn't just betrayal. It was cruelty beyond anything she had imagined. She dismounted and ran through the smoke-filled courtyard, dodging swinging blades and fallen bodies. She had to find Chief Bako. Inside the burning mansion, the air was thick with heat and the scent of charred wood. The grand halls that had once felt suffocating now felt like a death trap. Then, a groan. Zahara spun around and found Chief Bako slumped against a pillar, blood seeping from a wound on his side. His face was pale, his breath labored, but his eyes still held fire. "Zahara!" he choked out. "You came back." Tears burned her eyes. "They betrayed you. My stepmother. She planned this." Chief Bako gave a weak nod. "I know. I suspected. But I never thought she would move so soon." A hand grabbed Zahara's wrist, pulling her back. She turned to see Mama Koto, her face streaked with soot. "We have to go," Mama Koto urged. "The fire is spreading, and the guards are losing ground." Zahara's eyes darted between Chief Bako and the raging flames around them. The mansion, their only shelter, was falling apart. If they didn't leave now, they would all die. The mansion burned behind them, flames consuming the walls as screams and clashing swords filled the night. Zahara's heart pounded as she threw Chief Bako's arm over her shoulder, struggling to keep him upright. His wound was bleeding heavily, but he was still conscious, his jaw clenched against the pain. "This way," Mama Koto urged, leading them toward a hidden passage behind a crumbling stone wall. Zahara's lungs burned from the smoke, but she pushed forward. Mama Koto heaved aside an old wooden panel, revealing a narrow tunnel that led underground. A secret escape route. Chief Bako let out a weak chuckle. "So the old tunnels still stand." "No time for talking," Mama Koto snapped. "Move!" They stumbled inside just as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed behind them. The bandits had realized their prey was escaping. Zahara's breath hitched. They were being hunted. The tunnel was damp and dark, the walls lined with ancient carvings. Their footsteps echoed as they moved deeper, the air growing cooler. Zahara could hear Chief Bako's breathing grow heavier, but he refused to stop. The warrior in him was still fighting. Then, light. They emerged from the tunnel into the dense jungle, the thick canopy blocking out the rising sun. The cries of their pursuers were close behind. "Run!" Zahara gasped. They crashed through the undergrowth, thorns tearing at their clothes. Branches whipped at Zahara's face, but she didn't stop. The sounds of the bandits grew louder. They were too close, too fast. Suddenly, Mama Koto veered left, toward a cluster of ancient stone ruins covered in vines. "Here, we can hide inside." They ducked into a forgotten shrine, its walls cracked with age. Inside, the scent of damp earth filled the air. Zahara pressed herself against the stone, holding her breath as the sound of footsteps thundered past outside. Silence. For the first time since the attack, Zahara exhaled. She turned to Chief Bako, who leaned against the shrine's altar, his face pale from blood loss. Without thinking, she pressed her hands to his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. And in that moment, she realized, despite everything, she no longer saw him as just the old man she had been forced to marry. She had come to respect him, to care for him. And now, they had to find a way to fight back. Zahara sat beside Chief Bako, pressing a cloth against his wound. His breathing was shallow, but his eyes remained sharp. The fire that had once burned in his youth was still there, hidden beneath years of loss and betrayal. "We cannot keep running," Zahara said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "This is my fight now too." Chief Bako studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Then you must seek help. We cannot do this alone." Mama Koto looked worried. "Where will we find help? The bandits have taken control. The people are too afraid." But Zahara had already made up her mind. "I know where to go." Chief Bakos' lips twitched into the smallest smile. "Then go, Zahara, and return with an army." With the first light of dawn, Zahara set out on horseback, leaving the shrine behind. She rode through the dense jungle, through fields and rivers, pushing forward with one name in her mind, General Zuberi. She had heard of him before, a fierce warrior, once loyal to Chief Bako, now living in exile in a distant village. If anyone could help, it was him. Hours later, she arrived at a quiet village nestled between mountains. People whispered as she passed, their eyes wary of the stranger in dusty clothes. Then, she found him. Sitting outside a small hut, his body still strong despite his age, General Zuberi watched her approach. His face bore scars of many battles, and his gaze held suspicion. "Why have you come?" His voice rumbled. Zahara took a deep breath. "I am Zahara, wife of Chief Bako. His kingdom has fallen, and he is gravely wounded. We need your help." Zuberis' eyes darkened. Bako was a great leader, but his time has passed. Zahara stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "Then let me lead. Help me reclaim my home. Help me stop the ones who betrayed him, and who betrayed you." For a moment, Zuberi was silent. Then slowly, he stood. "You have the heart of a warrior," he said. "And I do not fight for kings, I fight for justice." He turned to the villagers behind him. "Gather the men, we ride before the sun sets." And just like that, Zahara had an army. The sun hung low in the sky as Zahara and General Zuberi stood at the edge of the jungle, overlooking the mansion that had once been her prison. Now, it was the battlefield where she would reclaim her destiny. Behind her, warriors from Zuberis village, former soldiers loyal to Chief Bako, and villagers who had suffered under the bandits' rule stood ready, armed with spears, bows, and fire in their hearts. "We strike at sundown," Zuberi declared. "They won't expect an attack at this hour." Zahara's grip tightened around the dagger at her waist. She had started this as a girl, with no control over her fate. But tonight, she would take it back. The attack began with a roar. Zahara led the charge, her heart pounding as their warriors stormed the gates. The bandits, caught off guard, stumbled from their posts as arrows rained down upon them. Swords clashed, men shouted, and the once grand courtyard became a battlefield. Zahara fought alongside her people, striking down any who stood in her way. She was no longer a helpless girl. She was a warrior. Inside the burning mansion, Chief Bako, wounded but still strong, confronted the woman who had betrayed him. "You destroyed your own family for greed," he spat, his voice filled with disgust. Zahara's stepmother stumbled back, her fine robes stained with smoke and dust, her once arrogant face twisted in terror. "Bako, please, I had no choice." "It was the warlord. He forced me." Zahara stepped forward, her dagger glinting in the firelight. She had once begged this woman for kindness, had once longed for a mother's love, but now she saw her stepmother for what she truly was, a coward, a liar, a woman who would sell even her own blood for power. "No more lies," Zahara said coldly. The woman fell to her knees. "Please, Zahara, I am your mother." Zahara's heart hardened. "You were never my mother." The warriors seized the woman, dragging her away to face justice. Outside, the last of the bandits fell, their forces scattered. The battle was won. Zahara turned to Chief Bako, who stood among his people once more, his home reclaimed. He looked at Zahara, pride in his weary eyes. "You have done what even I could not." And for the first time, Zahara knew this was her victory. This content may violate our usage policies. Did we get it wrong? Please tell us by giving this response a thumbs down. The sun rose over the battle-worn mansion, casting golden light over the land that had once been filled with fear. Now it was quiet, a kingdom reclaimed, a war finally won. Zahara stood at the edge of the courtyard, watching as the villagers and warriors cleared the remnants of battle. The people looked at her differently now, Not as a girl forced into marriage, but as a leader, a fighter, someone who had defied fate and won. Inside, Chief Bacco sat in his chamber, his wounds bandaged, but his spirit unbroken. When Zahara entered, he smiled, a small but knowing smile. "You fought bravely," he said. "You have proven yourself more than worthy." Zahara sat across from him, her heart steady but her mind racing. She had never imagined this moment. Chief Bacco leaned forward. "You have a choice now." His words caught her off guard. "Stay," he said. "Be my wife, not as a duty, but as an equal. Rule beside me, and together we will rebuild." Zahara's breath caught in her throat. A part of her had grown to respect him. He had been kind when he could have been cruel. He had fought for her when others had abandoned her. But another part of her knew the truth. Her journey was not meant to end here. She had discovered something greater than just her own survival. There were other girls, just like her, trapped in lives they never chose. She could help them. Zahara met his gaze, her voice unwavering. "I am grateful for everything you have done, but my path is different." Chief Bacco was silent for a moment, then he nodded. "And what will you do?" Zahara's eyes burned with determination. "I will make sure no other girl suffers what I did. I will help them escape, give them the freedom they deserve." A slow smile spread across Chief Bacco's face. "Then go, Zahara. Take your destiny in your own hands." He reached for a golden pendant around his neck, removing it and placing it in her palm. "This is my blessing. Wherever you go, you will always have my support." Tears welled in Zahara's eyes, but she did not cry. She had come to this place as a prisoner. Now she was leaving as something far greater. A leader, a warrior, a woman who chose her own fate. The wind carried the sound of laughter and chatter through the village. The world had changed since the night Zahara had ridden into battle, and she had helped shape that change. Years had passed, and now she was no longer just the girl who had been forced into marriage. She was a name spoken with respect, a symbol of hope. Young women came from distant villages to seek her guidance, and she welcomed them with open arms. She taught them skills, gave them shelter, and most importantly, she gave them a choice. No longer would daughters be sold for wealth. No longer would they live as prisoners in their own homes. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Zahara sat beneath an old tree, watching the village she had helped build. Footsteps approached behind her, slow and steady. She turned to see Chief Bacco, older now but still strong. His once black beard had turned silver, and his movements were slower, but his eyes still held the same wisdom. "You have built something remarkable," he said, settling beside her. Zahara smiled. "I could not have done it without your blessing." Chief Bacco chuckled. "You would have done it with or without me. You always had the fire in you." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the village lights flicker like stars. Zahara thought back to the frightened girl she had once been. The girl forced into marriage, desperate for freedom. She had not only found freedom, she had created it for others. She turned her gaze to the horizon, where the sky met the land in endless possibility. Her journey was far from over. With a deep breath, she rose to her feet. "There are still many more who need help." Chief Bacco nodded. "Then go. The world needs leaders like you." Zahara smiled. She had once believed destiny had taken everything from her. Now she knew the truth. Destiny had never been her enemy. It had only been waiting for her to take control. And so, with the sun setting behind her and a new road ahead, Zahara stepped forward. Not as a girl forced into fate, but as a woman who had shaped her own. Her legacy would live on,